It's 1967. The first self-titled album from The Doors is released. Texas Instruments invents the first handheld calculator, and Our World, the first live international satellite television production, airs, with the very first public performance from the Beatles of their soon-to-be #1 song, All You Need Is Love. This was a busy year, and for gamers, one invention becomes one of the most important events to ever happen. Hey everybody, and welcome to the Personal Computer Museum, and today we're going to be looking at the first video game console ever made, the Brown Box. Ralph Baer, Bill Harrison, and Bill Rush invent what is now known as the Brown Box, the first multiplayer, multi-program video game system for use on home televisions.
Some of the earlier versions actually have more games than this. But this was the one that was actually taken and modeled and became the Odyssey, which was the first game machine that beat out the Atari 2600, the VCS. There's one version that has like a pump, where you can like pump water into a well. There's like a well game. There's one that has like a spinning dial piece that you can use. But this is really the kind of the model that they used to make the Odyssey from.
Released in 1972, the Magnavox Odyssey is the first commercially sold video game console. Designed by Ralph Baer, the system features were very similar to the Brown Boxes. And while most people believe the first video game created for home systems was Pong, it actually wasn't.
And this is basically, this was the first game that was made. You try to catch me.
Essentially, this game is pretty much tag. One person controls one block, and the second player controls the other. The goal of the game is for one of the blocks to prevent the other from touching them. The players also have the ability to hide outside of the boundaries of the screen, meaning you can hide in the area that cannot be seen by either player, adding to the challenge of the game. There is no score, no lives, no changing of levels. It's a very basic concept, but it works. The Brown Box had a selection of games built into it, but one of them would start the video game industry as we know it.
There's 7 games that were built into the Brown Box. The first one is Ping Pong. Magnavox had an event showing off what was going to be the Odyssey. Nolan Bushnell and 2 fellow employees at Ampex, that's where he worked at the time, had actually gone to the show to see what was going on. And for years, Nolan Bushnell denied the fact that they had actually seen this in action before they came up with Pong and Alcorn made Pong. And then so many years ago, I'm going to guess maybe 7 or so, the actual attendance book, the logbook from the show was found. And in the book was Nolan Bushnell's signature, along with the 2 employees from Ampex. So since then, it happened at a CGE, the Classic Gaming Expo. Nolan Bushnell was there, and he admitted that he did see it, but he says he wasn't that impressed with it, and made improvements on it, and that's why it's his own baby, so to speak.
Ping Pong on the Brown Box isn't exactly like the famous Pong that Nolan Bushnell and his company Atari would make popular. Their version had some changes. The Brown Box has 3 dials and 1 button on the controller. 2 dials control your horizontal and vertical, allowing you to move your square or paddle anywhere on the screen, and the button was used to serve the ball. The 3rd dial was called English, allowing you to alter the path of the ball by curving its trajectory. This makes the Brown Box controllers and the game itself more challenging. What Atari brought to the table with Pong was a simplification of the controls. Now, your paddle was limited to vertical movement, controlled by a single knob or dial, and the game was engaged when you inserted a quarter or pressed the start button into the arcade cabinet or home console. Unlike the Brown Box version, depending on where the ball hit the paddle, it would alter the path of the ball, bouncing it off at an angle, eliminating the need for the English dial altogether. And to add one more feature, a score was introduced. While the Brown Box was not made for public consumption, the Odyssey was, but it didn't sell well. Atari would famously start to release arcade units and home consoles and achieve massive success for doing so. There came a point when you could find countless clones of Pong from several manufacturers. The 1970s saw the start of a brand new market, the video game industry. Magnavox would go on to sue countless companies for infringing on the patents related to Ralph Baer's early work, and every suit was settled or ended with them winning. While it would seem that the Magnavox Odyssey and the Brown Box would never make its way into the consciousness of the consumers the way that Atari did, Ralph Baer would turn around and do exactly what Atari did to him years later. In 1974, Atari would release a very unpopular arcade game called Touch Me. a 4-button game that played a randomized sequence of lights and harsh sounds that the player would have to replicate. The game builds up the sequence in difficulty the longer the players play the game. In 1978, Ralph Baer and Howard J. Morrison released the exact same game, but they add colored buttons, make the sound sequence harmonic, and they make it way smaller and portable. And to this day, Simon is still considered one of the greatest toys in games ever produced. The Brown Box and even the Odyssey never reached the recognition they deserved, and while most modern gamers today may not know the history of these systems, they benefit from their legacy in every game that they play.